Jessa Duggar is so happy to have a new life. On the other hand, Jessa Duggar's ex-husband is floating in the ocean of grief after losing his wife and losing an important family member. But why did they face divorce about so much love? Was it a premeditated plan? Let's try to figure out what to do today's video, but before that I want to tell you one more thing. Jana Duggar recently tied the knot with Stephen Wisman in what can only be described as one of the best-kept secrets of the Duggar family. Their wedding, which took place just last month, remained under wraps until mere hours before the couple exchanged vows, allowing them to celebrate their special day in relative privacy. Despite the family's usual public presence, it seems this time they managed to keep the details tightly under wraps, which only added to the intrigue surrounding the event. Recently, Jeremy Vuolo made headlines once again for calling out Jinger's father, Jim Bob Duggar, in a candid and bold manner. This time, his criticism came during an appearance on Costi Hins for the Gospel podcast, a platform dedicated to Christian teachings and theological discussions. Although Jinger and Jeremy remain devout Christians, they have made it clear that their beliefs differ significantly from the rigid framework enforced by Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar, which was heavily influenced by the teachings of IBLP. Jeremy used the podcast as an opportunity to openly challenge the practices of the Duggars' upbringing, particularly the concept of legalism, which was central to the way Jim Bob raised his children. Legalism, as Jeremy explained during the podcast, is the belief that salvation and righteousness can only be achieved by strictly following rules, regulations, and moral codes. According to legalistic thinking, a person's faith and salvation depend more on their ability to obey a set of standards rather than on their genuine devotion and relationship with God. Jeremy criticized this approach, arguing that it distorts the true meaning of Christianity, which should be based on grace, faith, and a personal connection with God, rather than an endless list of do's and don'ts. This criticism seemed to be directed not only at IBLP, but also at Jim Bob Duggar, who adhered to this rigid philosophy in raising his children. Jinger, too, has been outspoken about her difficult childhood, which was marked by the constant pressure to conform to the strict guidelines imposed by her parents. From the way the children dressed to their education and relationships, every aspect of their lives was governed by the IBLP's rules. Jinger has shared how this approach created a stifling environment where she and her siblings were taught to equate obedience with holiness. However, in recent years, Jinger has distanced herself from those teachings, and together with Jeremy, they have embraced a different form of Christianity, one that emphasizes freedom in faith and rejects the oppressive control of legalism. Jeremy's latest comments on the podcast are just one example of how the couple has continued to challenge the toxic teachings that shaped Jinger's upbringing. He explained how legalism undermines the true message of Christianity, focusing on outward behavior rather than the inner transformation of the heart. He stressed that following Christ is not about checking off a list of rules, but about a relationship based on grace, faith, and love. This perspective directly contradicts the IBLP's teachings, which promote strict obedience to authority and a rigid interpretation of biblical principles. While Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar remain firm in their adherence to IBLP's philosophy, Jeremy and Jinger have openly rejected it, and their message has resonated with many Christians who also grew up in similar environments. They have spoken extensively about how they have come to terms with their own faith journey and how they have built a new life free from the constraints of legalism. Jinger has even written a book, Becoming Free Indeed, where she delves into her personal experiences, offering insight into her transformation from a dutiful daughter bound by the rules of her family's belief system to a woman who now lives with a sense of spiritual freedom. Jeremy's critique of Jim Bob Duggar's adherence to legalism is particularly significant because it reflects a broader generational shift within the Duggar family. While some of the older Duggar siblings, like Jana, have remained close to their parents' teachings, others, like Jill and Jinger, have chosen to break away from the IBLP's influence and forge their own path. Jill Duggar, for instance, has also been open about her strained relationship with her parents and her decision to pursue therapy to address the impact of her upbringing. Similarly, Jinger and Jeremy's decision to live their lives openly and speak out against harmful teachings shows their commitment to living authentically, even if it means going against the family's long-held values. Despite their criticism of Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar's parenting methods, Jeremy and Jinger have remained deeply committed to their Christian faith. Their criticism is not of Christianity itself, but of the legalistic interpretation that they believe distorts the message of Christ. They have made it clear that they still hold their faith dear, but they have chosen to practice it in a way that aligns with their own understanding of grace, freedom, and love. In conclusion, Jeremy Vuolo's recent remarks about legalism and Jim Bob Duggar's parenting methods reflect a continued shift away from the toxic teachings of the IBLP that have shaped the Duggar family for decades. While Jinger and Jeremy have remained respectful of Jinger's family, they have not hesitated to speak out against the more harmful aspects of their upbringing. Their message has resonated with many who have faced similar struggles, and their commitment to challenging legalism shows their determination to embrace a form of Christianity that prioritizes grace and love over rigid rules and control. Jeremy Vuolo has never been one to shy away from expressing his views, particularly when it comes to discussing faith, religion, and the role of legalism in distorting one's relationship with God. In a recent Christian podcast hosted by Costi Hinn, Jeremy opened up once again, but this time his words carried a sharper edge, directly challenging the very principles that he believes have negatively shaped his wife, Jinger Duggar's, upbringing. His comments, though veiled in careful language, resonated strongly with followers of Duggar News, as they seemed to indirectly target Jim Bob Duggar, Jinger's father, and the Institute in Basic Life Principles, IBLP, the religious organization the Duggar family has long been associated with. During the podcast, Jeremy took aim at legalism, a belief system that places an undue focus on following a rigid set of rules and regulations in order to achieve salvation. In his view, legalism not only distorts the character of God, but it also poisons the spiritual lives of those who follow it. He explained that legalism presents a false image of God as someone who is only pleased when his followers are obedient to a strict set of rules. Jeremy emphasized that this approach to faith reduces God's love to a transactional relationship, where obedience is met with blessings and disobedience with punishment. According to this line of thinking, if you follow the rules, you'll earn salvation. In his view, legalism not only distorts the character of God, but it also poisons the spiritual lives of those who follow it. He explained that legalism presents a false image of God as someone who is only pleased when his followers are obedient to a strict set of rules. Jeremy emphasized that this approach to faith reduces God's love to a transactional relationship, where obedience is met with blessings and disobedience with punishment. According to this line of thinking, if you follow the rules, you'll earn